Hello, good evening or good morning. You could be anywhere in the world from Zurich to Zaire, so we're very, very appreciative that you're here today to come and listen to our action-packed masterclass, 10 skills for the future workforce. Last year has been an absolute blur, and there are plenty of interesting things happening in the future of the creative economy, and we have a wonderful, wonderful guest here today. So let's have a look at our guest. My name is Joseph O'Brien. I am an MBA student, currently in Module 8, studying entrepreneurship in emerging markets. Our guest speaker today is Mr. Nasser Sahlool. He's the Vice President of DAC, which is a digital marketing agency group in Toronto, Canada. Welcome today, Nasser. A big welcome to you, and thank you very much for coming here today.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here today. Excited to talk about this.
And I'm excited to listen as well. For all students who are on the call at the moment, this is an opportunity for you to cite and reference anything that you hear. Just make sure you name drop Mr. Sahlool properly for anything that you hear in this webinar today, but a good opportunity, plenty of stuff to get our teeth into. So a few house rules before I let you take over, Nasser, with today's presentation. Today is an open presentation with a Q&A. That means in about 45 minutes time, there'll be a session where any of the questions that you have can be put to Nasser himself. So keep your ears open, and anything that interests you, type a question in the little box that you have there, and I'll be looking through those questions and I'll be addressing some of those questions to Nasser. Nasser, for you have about 45 minutes where you're going to go through your presentation, 10 skills for the future workforce. And I'm going to disappear on camera and I'm going to listen and enjoy the presentation. And I will allow you to take it away. So thank you again, Nasser, and thank you to our audience today. Enjoy today's presentation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody, wherever you might be. I am in Toronto, Canada. It is an extremely cold day today, as you would hope it would be at the end of January. This is what I'm talking about today. What we're going to be discussing are a number of things. First of all, the forces that are driving change in the workplace. On that, then we're going to build and talk about the 10 skills that you need to thrive, how to acquire these skills, how to apply and develop them throughout your career, and then a concept that I like to talk about around becoming vital to your organization. How do you apply these skills and really become not just relevant to the people that you work with and work for, but also how you become vital. And then how do you ensure long-term success with all of the change and disruption that's happening out there in the world and in your various industries. So just very, very quickly, a little bit about me and why I'm particularly interested in talking about this subject. I have over 20 years in international enterprise marketing. Why does that matter? It matters because the marketing and advertising industries, because of the level of competition, because of their adjacency and dependency on technology, are one of the first industries always to be disrupted by whatever innovations and technologies are kind of coming to the fore. So a lot of what we've seen in our industry is starting to play out in other spaces. I am VP of Client Strategy at DAC Group. In my work as VP of Client Strategy, what I do is I look after the strategy, strategic insights, and research of our clients, connecting digital solutions with business objectives and outcomes. DAC Group, for your reference, is one of the largest independent digital media agencies anywhere, based out of here in Toronto, but with offices across Europe as well and the United States. And in the context of my work at DAC Group, I have interviewed literally hundreds and hired many, many, many of those people. And I interview typically 2 or 3 people a day just to kind of keep up with our growth. And I see very particular trends in how people are positioning themselves, how people are coping with the change in the industry. One of the key components is that we work in a very competitive landscape, not just from a winning a new business perspective, but also in terms of acquiring, retaining, and growing talent. So I am extremely passionate about the idea of skills development in a competitive landscape. In fact, I am a blogger and regular podcaster at Octopus Digital Strategy, which you can Google and find, in which I talk specifically about how to develop your skills as a strategist. And I've interviewed, as part of that project, literally dozens of people around the world to see how things are different in their local markets. I am a very proud Canadian, although I should point out that I am also a first-generation immigrant. So I've been a Canadian for about 10 years, and I have worked extensively in the United States and lived there as well, Europe, as well as North and East Africa and Asia. And I'm a holder of 3 degrees from British universities. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well as we go along. And last but certainly not least, father of 2 rambunctious little boys. So the kind of theme that I wanted to go with today and talk about it, as far as background is concerned, is where we are in the world today. And I came across this this concept that I think really neatly wraps it up. And it is this idea. This is an old Chinese curse, and they talk about, may you live in interesting times. Obviously, interesting times imply disruption, and I don't think that anyone would deny that these are not interesting times that we live in. From an economic perspective, from a geopolitical perspective, obviously all of this is quite closely tied together. And I wanted to start off by talking about the forces that are driving this disruption, the forces that are driving change. And I see them in 4 distinct but interrelated areas. So if we look at the forces that are driving change, it starts with globalization. You know, Tom Friedman a while back wrote about the world being flat. This is certainly true. So one of the biggest and earliest sources of disruption was the fact that people in various parts of the world, through the use of technology, reduction of trade barriers and so on, could do your job to the same level of quality at a fraction of the price. So that is a big early driver that has been driving change. Built on that is automation. We've clearly seen a lot of automation in certain sectors like the manufacturing sector and so on, and everybody's aware of those types of areas of automation, but we're now starting to see it increasingly in the white-collar space. You know, in the marketing industry, for example, there's an entire subsection of the marketing industry that is called marketing automation, and it's automating a lot of the functions that used to occupy the careers of many, many people in this space. Another force that is integrated into that is this idea of Uberification. So everyone's familiar with the Uber app and the disruption that it's brought to that industry. And the idea behind Uberification is technology-driven and enabled capability for people to join a marketplace in an informal way. This disrupts existing industries, it depresses wages, and it leads to massive redundancy. Now, there are significant benefits from a consumer perspective, but from a human perspective, from a career perspective, this is certainly very, very disruptive. And then there's the emerging space of artificial intelligence. Now, there's a lot of conversation about artificial intelligence. I can't go to a conference without hearing someone talk about, you know, this is enabled through machine learning or AI. We're not quite there yet, but we're on the brink of this happening. Why is this important? Well, if you think about some of the recent stories, when you think about the combination of these elements, let me give you 2 anecdotes that I think are extremely illuminating and daunting when we think about where this is going. In the United States today, the most common job for people in most of the states is truck driver. So that is the single most common job in most states in the United States. And yet we are on the verge of starting to see self-driving trucks take to the road. So when that happens, what's going to happen to all of those jobs? What's going to happen to all of those people that are dependent on those jobs? And don't think for a moment that this is a blue-collar phenomenon. There was an article just a couple of weeks ago about a law firm that is actually using artificial intelligence to create legal briefs, and as a result of that, they're laying off lawyers inside of their organization. So this is something that will be felt throughout the entire industry, regardless of the industry that you work in. So with all of that in mind, and I don't want this to come off as all, you know, doom and gloom, I see enormous benefits from a consumer perspective. I see enormous benefits from a qualitative perspective, an efficiency perspective. But as individuals, we need to be prepared for this. We need to recognize that this is happening, that it's happening much faster than a lot of people have been anticipating, and we need the skills in order to succeed in this environment. So with that in mind, what are the 10 skills that you need to succeed in this environment? I'm going to list them here, and then I'm going to go through each one in turn. I'm going to expand on each one for a few minutes. So the first one is a strategic perspective. Now this is, it's a little trite to talk about a strategic perspective because, you know, it's one of those overused words, one of those overused terms. You know, people would often say to me, hey, strategically, how do I deal with this problem? Which is really just code for how do I make my problem into your problem? But I'm going to talk about what it really means to have a strategic perspective. The second component is storytelling ability. So that doesn't mean necessarily, you know, a deep ability to tell a rich story, but I'm using the context of storytelling from the perspective of being able to connect and convince your peers, your clients, your customers, your managers, and so on. Analytical capabilities. We're seeing the rise of the quants right now. And I'm going to talk about analytical capabilities not in terms of everybody needs to go out and you know, earn a math degree, but from the perspective of how you action that analytical capability, how you action the data and use it to drive results. The next skill is digital fluency. It's not about, you know, everybody needs to go out and become a digital marketer, but you, regardless of your industry, need fluency with digital platforms, digital systems, and I'll talk about how you can acquire that specific skill. The next skill is to be fearless and to be the change agent. Change is happening. It's going to happen regardless of whether you like it or not. And the way to stay ahead of it is to not just embrace it, but to be the one that's driving that change. Emotional intelligence and empathy are interesting because a lot of what we've talked about around automation, around data and technology seems to fly in the face of the need for emotional intelligence and empathy, but I would argue that the way for people to thrive in this environment is to be able to connect better as people, as human beings with our peers. Passion for what you do. Again, this is one of these overused terms. I'm going to talk a little bit about why this is so important and how you can apply it in your work. And then restless curiosity. It's not enough to do what you always do. You have to be asking, why are we doing things this way? Because without doing that, you cannot become a change agent. You cannot look for opportunities for improvement. And then a passion for continuous learning. You can't do these things without learning about our areas or functions or topics that are outside of your comfort zone. And then finally, a drive to develop the careers of others. One of the things that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes is the concept of making yourself redundant. If you do not do that, you will be stuck in doing the same things that you've always done ad nauseum. So it's really important that you need to have a drive to train others to take on these functions to give you the space and opportunity to learn new things. So with that in mind, let's start with each of these items. A strategic perspective. I'm going to give you a quote here that I think really beautifully encapsulates what a strategic perspective really means. This is by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, excuse me for my French, who wrote, among other things, The Little Prince. And it's a wonderful quote. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up people together to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. Now, I love this because I think that one of the great challenges we have is we get so wrapped up in our everyday work, our everyday tasks and deliverables, that we lose sight of why we do these things, of the value that we're trying to drive, and what really, really matters at the end of the day. And the faster that we can develop that strategic perspective, the more that we can remind ourselves that that strategic perspective matters deeply, the greater value that we will be able to demonstrate to our peers, to our managers, to our customers, and ultimately the more successful we will be in this type of an environment. So on that, one thing that I would strongly encourage you to do once we're done here, go on YouTube, search for this guy, Simon Sinek. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work, but he has a wonderful talk, and it's called Start With Why. This, in my opinion, is one of the clearest articulations and encapsulations of what it means to have a strategic perspective. It's about 15 minutes long. You won't regret watching it. And for me, it is my touchstone and the thing that I always come back to. But when you have a strategic perspective in the business context, the first thing that you do is you align your work with revenue. What do I mean by that? What I mean is you have a choice in the work that you do to either be a cost center or a profit center. And my instinct is always to move whatever I do into becoming a profit center and show that the work that I do directly impacts revenue, either revenue for my organization, revenue for my customers, or whomever. So always ask yourself, how does the work that I do align and impact revenue? How does my work impact business? I could be in a highly technical function. I could be in a highly administrative function, but I need to be able to showcase how my work, how my functions, how my deliverables impact the business and specifically the business revenue. In order to do that, I need to look beyond my area of responsibility. So this is something that I am always surprised by because I think it's fairly obvious. But it's amazing to me how few people do this. Typically, it's because people are very, very busy. But this idea of if I look beyond my day-to-day work and I try to understand what other people are doing that I'm either dependent on or that are dependent on me, I can better frame up how these different functions, how these tasks and responsibilities impact each other, how they integrate with each other, and how together they deliver on the business or strategic objective. Very few people do this. And it does require you to get out of your comfort zone and learn the work of others. I strongly urge and encourage you to do that. And by doing it, you get to act as the bridge to the business, because what typically happens is people become so focused on their day-to-day activities that they aren't capable of articulating very often how their activities and their work impacts the business. So the faster and clearer that you can become that bridge to the business, not just from your function, but from the functions of your colleagues, the greater your opportunities for success. And within that, there cannot be any sacred cows. So what do I mean by that? I mean basically that you can't say, this is how we've always done it, or my job depends on us doing it this way. You have to have the courage, you have to have the conviction and the confidence to be able to say, no, this is holding us up, or this is counterproductive to our requirements or to our customers' requirements. Because believe me, if you're not doing that, someone else will. And the faster that you do that, the faster that you find ways to disrupt your work and the work of the organization for the better, the more valuable you will be, the more successful you will be. So that's just a couple of thoughts on a strategic perspective. building on that, let's talk a little bit about storytelling ability. Here's a great quote from a guy I really admire in this space, Andrew Stanton. So Andrew Stanton is a director. He's done a lot of Pixar movies. One of them is WALL-E. Again, I recommend you go on YouTube and you look up some of the TED Talks by Andrew Stanton in how to tell a great story. There's some wonderful materials out there. But this sits at the heart of it. This idea of make me care. Emotionally, intellectually, aesthetically, just make me care. And that could sound glib until we kind of understand what sits behind that, how we do that. So this is a further quote from Andrew Stanton. Storytelling is joke telling. It's knowing your punchline, your ending, knowing everything you're going to say from the first sentence to the last is leading to a singular goal, and ideally confirming some truths that deepen our understanding of who we are as human beings. So think about that in the context of what we just talked about with regards to a strategic perspective, knowing your goal, right? And showcasing how everything that you're saying leads up to that goal. In order to be a good storyteller, in order to be able to communicate on a human level, you have to understand your audience. Is the person you're communicating with analytical, or are they visionary? Are they closed, or are they conversational? This will define for you how you tell your story, how you communicate the point that you want to make. For example, if your audience is highly analytical, these people are skeptical, and they take time to process data. So make sure that you provide them with all the data in advance of your communication with them. Give them an opportunity, give them time to digest that data. Then reference the data in making your point, and also importantly, rely on third-party points of affirmation to reinforce the point that you're making. If they're visionary, don't do any of that. Get straight to the point immediately. Paint them a big picture. They will believe you if you are able to connect with them on that type of a level. So this idea of storytelling ability is really critical as we become much more data-driven, much more data-obsessed, much more technologically driven. And it's the way that we're able to connect as people, because at the end of the day, it's still people that hire people. Okay, so let's talk about data. Let's talk about analytical capabilities. Obviously, this is an important one. Today, I remember I was at Google in Mountain View a couple of years ago, and they gave us an interesting stat. They talked about how the fact that there, by now, essentially, by 2017, there would be about 500,000 more data analysis jobs open than there are people in school studying those functions. These are jobs that didn't exist as of a few years ago. And these are jobs that today command 6 figures in salary. And by the way, these are the jobs that are the most difficult to recruit for and to retain that talent. But one of the things that I see, so while acquiring analytical capabilities is important, I want to talk about going beyond that, because what I see is a challenge in over-analysis of the data. This is a great quote from Marcus Aurelius. Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. Now, this is perhaps ironic, going back to this idea of the times that we live in. But I want to be sure to kind of highlight this, because I want to talk about actioning the data. So in my industry, you know, we went from offline and analog marketing and advertising, TV advertising, radio, and so on, where we were a little thin on the metrics, shall we just say. It was about feelings and brand. And we dived into digital advertising, which is all about ones and zeros. What happened? Well, what happened was suddenly we became paralyzed by the amount of information. And I would encourage you to focus not so much on the data, but the insight. Focus on actionable insights. So this idea that everybody is drowning in data, but they're starved for information. What do we do with this information? So when we're thinking about analytical functions, Focus less on fetching and organizing and reporting data. Focus more on actioning it, because that is where organizations invariably stumble, is the ability to do anything. There's a concept called growth hacking. Look it up. It's an interesting concept. It's been driven by the Silicon Valley tech companies, and the idea of growth hacking kind of works like this. You start with a hypothesis. I believe if we did X, we would achieve Y. You then ask the questions that need answering to prove this hypothesis. What does our audience look like? Do they respond appropriately, or will they respond positively to us if we did these things? Look for any data that supports or disproves this hypothesis, just enough to either say, yes, we feel with an 80% level of certainty that this is the right approach, or no, this data actually shows that we're way off. And then put it in market. From there, you use real-time data to then optimize quickly. But the key thing is put it in market, test it out, fail fast, iterate, move on to your next test. So that's the key thing that I want you to take away. Yes, you need analytical capabilities, but you need to focus your efforts on actionable analysis as opposed to the deep organization and reporting of information. So that brings us to the subject of digital fluency. So what do we mean by digital fluency? In a lot of industries, so I look at the marketing and advertising industry, which of course is the space where I'm most familiar with, and the way that a lot of organizations have kind of moved into digital media is they would have a head of digital marketing, or they'd have a digital department. And it's kind of off to the side doing its own thing. And that's okay to start, but recognize that real digital disruption starts throughout, or goes throughout the entire organization. And digital is at the heart of the disruption. Technology is at the heart of the disruption in every single industry today. So when we talk about fluency, this is not about familiarity. Yeah, I know how to use the internet. I know how to use email. I know how to build a blog. It's about deep understanding of how these things interconnect, how it works. You really need this regardless of the industry that you work in, regardless of your function. The faster that you can get to fluency with digital tool sets, with technological automation platforms, the better your position is for the future and in this disrupted economy. So how do you get this? Well, there's certainly formal courses at universities, at colleges, that can help you get started with the fundamentals of digital publishing, shall we say, rather than marketing. Let's think about it as publishing. But my strong recommendation is to build on this. Build your own hands-on side project. Build your own blog. Build a podcast. Develop a social account. Develop a video channel. And make it about the thing you do. Make it about your work. It can be a subject that is adjacent to your work, but make it about something that you really know a lot about. Because today, when recruiters, when potential employers are looking for new team members, they are looking not just in terms of what you say on your resume, but they're looking at your digital footprint. How are you demonstrating your capability in this space? How are you demonstrating your familiarity with the space? What is your direct point of view on these changes in your industry? If you're not able to demonstrate this through a blog, a medium, a podcast, or what have you, it's hard to be able to really, showcase expertise. This is a way to build a digital footprint that speaks to your expertise without you having to push it. It takes time. Build it early. Don't start it when you need it. If you need it, it means that you're either out of work or you're about to be out of work. And then it feels forced and rushed. Start early, be consistent, do this over time. Doing this really helps differentiate you in a very, very crowded and competitive marketplace. Doing this then allows you to become the change agent. So let's talk about that. How do you be the change agent? There's a tremendous quote from Niccolo Machiavelli, which I think really encapsulates how you need to approach this. So he talks about, I'm not interested in preserving the status quo. I want to overthrow it. And you have to always have this itch, this burning need to say, it's not good enough. We have to make it better. I encourage you on that to read a great book, download it. It's called Blue Ocean Strategy, or go to blueoceanstrategy.com, I think is the website, and download some resources. This concept is the driving force behind all the disruption, all of the innovation that's happened in Silicon Valley. So applying and deploying this type of thinking to whatever your industry is really interesting. In a nutshell, the Blue Ocean strategy, or the Blue Ocean strategy concept, talks about creating uncontested market space for yourself. So it talks about red oceans and blue oceans. Red oceans are environments where everybody knows the rules of engagement, everybody is competing essentially, and there's a drive to the bottom, there's a race to the bottom, because it's really hard to differentiate. A blue ocean approach is taking on a different approach to perhaps an established industry where nobody is competing and where the market then goes, and you get to charge significantly greater premiums, significantly greater fees, and essentially not have to compete. It's really important to do this. It's really important to think in these terms because change is inevitable. It is inevitable. So in that, your opportunity is to be the disruptor, be water. So, you know, this is a great quote from Bruce Lee. I encourage you to look it up. So Google Bruce Lee, be water. And he talks about the concept of being water, you know, bending and changing shape, and, you know, sidestepping the issue, but changing and driving rapidly when you have a point of conviction. So that is something that helps you conceptualize about becoming that change agent. Build your case through use of SWOT analysis or Porter's 5 forces. Again, look these up. I talk about these quite extensively in my blog and podcast as well. But the driver behind all of this is to challenge this concept of it's how we've always done it. If you hear that, it is just ripe for disruption. And the way that you then drive that is you need to subsequently rally others to your cause by showing benefits of change to them as individuals. So one of the biggest problems with being a change agent is you're going to disrupt other people's careers. You're going to disrupt other people's jobs. By showing the benefit of change to them, you get them on board. So always, it's not enough to think in disruptive terms. You have to sell this through to your colleagues or the people that you depend on to make this happen. And to do that, you need empathy. You need emotional intelligence. So a little bit on that. You know, what are we talking about when we mention empathy? This isn't sympathy. Empathy is the capacity to feel what another person is feeling from their frame of reference. Put yourselves in their shoes. Look through their eyes. It's really critical for 2 reasons. Because first of all, it impacts our ability to get things done. If we cannot see through another person's eyes, we aren't able to understand why they are resisting our recommendations. It also helps us to identify winning opportunities. Empathy is an area that, as the technologists flex their muscles, as the technicians who drive and implement the technologies become more prominent in the workplace, this is the area that they typically have the greatest challenge with. I'm trying to be as polite as I can. But empathy is an opportunity to set yourself up and set yourself apart from the technicians. It allows you to translate their work into human into human terms. And that is important because the human element, that's the most difficult element to automate. Building on that is this idea of passion for what you do. So this is a wonderful perspective from Rumi. Forget safety. Live where you fear to live. Destroy your reputation. Be notorious. To do this, you need passion. So passion leads to relentlessly great execution. If you're not passionate about something, you're going to use terms like, well, this is good enough. Good enough is not good enough. If you hear that, you have a problem. You've always got to be looking at ways to make it better. Passion carries you through difficult times. We will all experience difficult times. We experience it every day. If we are not passionate about the work that we do, how are we going to cope? How are we going to excel? Passion is infectious. It's convincing. If we are not passionate about the work that we do, how can we expect others to become passionate about it? How can we expect others to work that extra bit harder, stay that extra bit later, deliver that extra bit greater thought? If we are not passionate, they will not be passionate. And by being the passionate one, you become the driver in the organization, and that helps you succeed in a disrupted environment. Passion also drives curiosity, and curiosity is absolutely critical. Without curiosity, there is no way of surviving in this type of an environment. You need restless curiosity because, as Socrates said, wisdom begins in wonder. It's so important to have this deep desire for knowledge, this deep desire for to figure out what's round the next bend, this deep desire to ask why. I have two boys. This is the first question that they ever asked. Why? This is what we need to do. Why? And I love how, as parents, no matter how much we try, we always end up with, because I said so. But this is the first question we ask as human beings when we are able to speak, because it's the natural part of curiosity. But curiosity is the driver for excellence. It's the catalyst for growth. It forces us to understand how things work together. In this deeply interconnected world, if we're the ones who are connecting it together, that's our opportunity to excel and grow in our careers. And without curiosity, we cannot have a strategic perspective, which takes us back to that initial idea of one of the skills that we need. You simply cannot do that. Curiosity is coupled with a passion for continuous learning. Here's a great concept from Leonardo da Vinci, who knew a thing or two about this. Iron rusts from disuse, stagnant water loses its purity, and in cold weather becomes frozen. Even so does inaction sap the vigor of the mind. Continuous learning is the only way to stay ahead of this, this enormous and scary wave that's crashing around us. Now, formal higher education is the founder for new careers or career change. Today, we're at a point where degrees are required even for junior roles. And let me be absolutely unequivocal about this. The institution matters. I review a dozen resumes a day. I'm interviewing for myself, I'm interviewing for my colleagues in offices around the world. One of the conversations that invariably comes up is their education. And when we look at their education, we look at the degree, we look at the institution, and the reputation of that institution is what matters above all, trumping even the degree. It's really interesting how the mind works. But you do need to combine this with informal and self-directed education. So look for opportunities for hands-on education. Learn from your colleagues. Sit down and ask them, how does this work? I know one of my, I have a friend who is a CEO of a manufacturing organization. And as part of the onboarding, for every single employee, regardless of whether they work on the floor, the manufacturing floor, or they work in the C-suite, is every day for a month, every single person goes and works on one of the stations somewhere so that everybody is aware of what everybody else's job is. Now, the idea is not that you can do everybody's job, but you have an appreciation of the challenges, the difficulties, and then the opportunities that exist for making that better. So always look to your colleagues for opportunities to sit down and say, show me how you do this. Or can you give me a task that I can do in my spare time that supports the work that you do? Because I want to learn how it works. I want to learn the nuts and bolts behind it. And then the final skill is about the drive to develop the careers of others. This is really, really important. Let me explain why. In order to learn new functions, in order to learn new skills, in order to develop new opportunities, you need time and space. So you need to scale your efforts. Start with the functions that are most repetitive, your functions that are most repetitive. Train replacements. By the way, why these functions? Because A, it's the easiest to train, and B, it's the easiest to automate. So always start with these functions. Develop your team to take on more responsibility and use the time that becomes available to you to acquire the next skill set. So once you combine all of these skills, think about this idea of vitality. People talk about, I want to be relevant. Well, relevance is mediocre. It means good enough. Stay vital by remembering who you work for. You don't work for yourself. You don't work for your boss. You work for your customer. Who is the customer? Move yourself closer to the revenue and make yourself uncomfortable. Ask yourself, these functions that I'm doing, are they necessary? Is there a better way to deliver these functions? And if so, let me be the person who's making myself redundant so that I can focus on more strategic outputs and outcomes. And by doing so, I avoid someone else doing that for me. And then do this over the long term. So change can be exhausting and the pressure can be relentless. To succeed in the long term and to overcome daily obstacles, focus on, why am I doing this? Make it tangible and define clear objectives. Is this about buying a house? Is this about supporting my family, putting my child through college? Make it tangible. It can be about your work or it can be about the reasons why you work. And what are you doing to achieve that objective? Define specific actions. Articulate a timeline. If you get to the end of that timeline and you're nowhere near your objectives, that might imply that you need a strategic shift in your career. So in summary, the world is getting smaller. You need a bigger perspective. This chaos that we live in today, it's not a pit, it's a ladder. Chaos and disruption breeds opportunity. Embrace and drive change. Become that change agent. You need hard and soft skills to succeed. You can acquire them through formal education and layer on informal, self-directed education. Be strategic, be vital, and prepare for the long term. Any questions on any of that?
Well, thank you very much, Nasser. We have many questions on this. Opportunity does make kings of us all. I think you raised so many interesting points there. I remember when I used to work for Booking.com, we used to have a scheme called 5 times why. You start a project. Why are you starting this project? Oh, because they need help with this, revenue generating unit. But why? Oh, because they're having a problem with this. But why? Because and after 5 times why, you had a very different perspective on the reason why you were doing anything. So it's kind of half works for curiosity, but it also works to see whether what you're doing is really value added as well. So I really enjoyed that. Now, thank you very much to our audience members who have put in a whole bunch of questions for you. We won't be able to get through all of them today, but I have some of them for you, Nasser. Unedited, so we're just going to go through them and take them as they are.
Wonderful.
Interesting one about storytelling. Are storytellers better positioned than people with high analytical capabilities? I have seen people who talk more than what they produce and have very good or excellent appraisals. Interesting.
You know what? I go back to this concept of storytelling being rooted in understanding your audience and being able to communicate with them. So I work with a lot of both. I work with a lot of highly analytical people. I work with a lot of very strong storytellers.
Mhm.
I can tell you that in the short term and against specific types of functions, um, highly analytical people are easier to fit into an organization, and a lot of organizations um, veer towards hiring those individuals, but there are limits to their capabilities to develop their careers if they don't develop storytelling capabilities. A storyteller is automatically on a faster path to becoming more senior in their organization because they instinctively know how best to communicate laterally, how to communicate with their teams, and how to communicate with their managers.
Would you say that those are human characteristics that we haven't perfected with machine learning yet, and that and analytical jobs we probably will be able to automate? Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. So there was the whole a couple of years ago. The big buzzword was big data. Everyone talked about big data and the big data revolution. Thank God that's
We have a
over.
webinar next week, Natter, so if anyone wants to know, come and hear.
But one of the considerations there is that machine learning drives automation, and anything that is analytical, as far as a function is concerned, is because it's a binary function, is easier to automate. What artificial intelligence is about is not. So here's a little misconception. It is not the ability of a machine to think instead of a human being. It is the ability of a machine to think like a human being. So eventually, um, where a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence is focused on right now is how do you replicate the human mind? So let me give you a concrete example. Um, there is a lot of conversation right now about machines being able to spot trends. So a machine can analyze enormous social media data trends and say, okay, here's a trend. And it can spit that back to you quite easily, and you can do that today, and you can then build off of that trend. What artificial intelligence is about is not spotting the trend, but it's the machine creating the trend.
Mm.
And that is where the world is going. That is about a machine not being able to spot beauty. It's about a machine creating beauty.
Wow. Now, in terms of storytelling, going back to my consumer behavior module, looked at Patagonia, one of the companies that does brand storytelling, maybe
Mm.
better than most people. Have you got any other examples here of companies that are good storytellers?
So one of my personal favorite brands is a Canadian company. It's called Arc'teryx, Arcteryx. They're a competitor to Patagonia, and they tell beautiful, immersive stories through the function, through the various channels that they operate, and deploying and using ambassadors who are very close to their target audience. But I would recommend that you check those out. One of the most recent and revolutionary pieces of digital storytelling. It's a couple of years old now, but it was done by the New York Times, and it was a story called Snowfall. I believe it was called Snowfall. You just look it up. But it was a really innovative way of integrating the spoken word, the written word, video, all of these different elements together in creating a wonderfully rich environment. But the key thing with storytelling, whether it's in a digital format or a human interaction, is understand who you're communicating with and understand what it is that you want them to take away. If there's one thing that you want them to take away from this communication, what is that thing?
Okay, so we have a few ones, few that are more straight down the line in terms of customer acquisition, keeping customers, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Based on your experience, how do we keep how does one keep one's customers from coming back to you consistently? How do you figure out that your customer needs you or something else that you have? So kind of knowing our customers' jobs to get done here. How do we do that? How do we make sure our customers come back and we know what they want?
That's a big question.
The age-old question.
Right. So a couple of considerations. It starts with conversation. When we need open lines of communication with our customers, if it's a mass audience, then there's enormous variety and capabilities around tools, research tools, and so on. So I can think of, if you're thinking about customer or audience research tools, Forrester, ComScore, Hitwise, eMarketer. There's enormous repositories of data that are out there. Nielsen. There's also social platforms and listening tools, whether it's a Sysomos or a Radian6 or a Hitwise, NetBase. But I think where it starts, if I work in an agency, and where we start is not just the tools and the analytics and the platforms that allow you to analytically understand customer behavior and wants and needs, but an open line of communication with my customers to say, what are you looking for? What are the things that are driving you? What are the things that are concerning you, your hopes and needs and aspirations? These kinds of communications are around the fundamentals of the human condition are more important than asking them, what widget or feature are you looking for? Henry Ford has once famously said, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. So don't ask them what it is that, what product they want or what enhancement they want. Ask them instead more fundamental human questions, and out of that, you're going to be able to uncover deeper needs. But I do recommend looking at frameworks like Porter's 5 Forces. It's a wonderful framework to be able to really understand where you sit with relation to your customers. Again, Google it. There's a lot of material out there that can tell you about how to deploy Porter's 5 Forces in your specific space or industry.
Exactly, and if you're taking any of our management programs, I'm sure you either have come across it already or you're about to, and it really is a guiding light for looking at competition and doing what Porter calls an environmental analysis, looking at who are the other people competing in your industry and what are the options that you have. So let's have a look at some more of these questions. Quite an interesting one touching upon empathy and emotional intelligence. Having empathy is connected to emotional intelligence. If empathy is not a natural trait for someone, how does one develop that themselves? So it's almost if one might be a bit more neutral, or we have some people maybe in data maybe who are a bit more neutral, less their face is more of a poker face in the office, and you might not be able to tell what they're thinking, and that's absolutely fine. But how does someone maybe foster a bit of that and kind of bring a bit of that empathy forward? Are there some practical steps, Nasser?
There are practical steps, and there are functions. There are training functions to how you can train yourself to become more empathetic. One of the and all of those resources are available online, but I do want to focus on one key component. If you are empathetic, you are by definition a good listener. So think about this in context in relation to what we were talking about being a good storyteller. A good storyteller is not necessarily the most articulate person. It is somebody who listens and observes. So being able to listen to what people are saying, to be able to understand their body language, to hear the things that they're saying and not saying, and to be able to ask the questions, ask the leading questions that help you uncover what the people in front of you are feeling. My recommendation is twofold. First, do look up, there are books on the subject around developing empathy, because yes, it is there are elements of it that are trainable and that you can acquire, but beyond that, a very simple function. When you're in a conversation with somebody and you feel compelled to say something, don't. And what most people do in conversation is they are listening and they're waiting for an opportunity to respond. Fight that urge and just listen. Listen to the things that the person is telling you, and then pause and think about the things that they've just told you. You will be amazed how much more productive that would be as a communication vehicle compared to what we as human beings typically do.
I totally agree. Are there things like maybe I always said, walk a mile in someone else's shoes is always the thing that your mother says to you or someone. Especially helpful in understanding different cultures, as well, and races and religions, etc. Would you say that there could be some practical stuff, like a bit of work shadowing, jumping in and doing someone else's tasks, and kind of stuff like that, that kind of gets you an idea of their backlog, the pressures on them, etc.? There are a few little things that people can do like that?
Unquestionably, unquestionably. So one of the things that we did talk about is exactly this function whereby you spend time either shadowing one of your colleagues or asking them, asking them to give you tasks that are more menial, the more menial parts of their work, and give you direction on how to do them. This does a couple of things. First of all, yes, it helps you build empathy as to what they're going through and helps you understand the challenges that they face in a day-to-day basis or on a day-to-day basis. But it also does something else. It's a very rare thing for somebody to say that to a colleague and to want to, and to take a genuine interest in their work, and it immediately builds rapport. They feel more appreciated, they trust you more as a result of doing that. So it's a great way of building rapport with your colleagues, is taking a genuine interest in their work, and by doing so you're able to essentially say in a sincere way, I value the work that you do.
Perfect. I mean, to some degree, you have to step out of your comfort zone. You can invite someone different for lunch, not the same person every day, or these little things make you build connections with people that you didn't think that you'd have. We're running out of time here, and another couple of questions, and then we'll have to wrap up the session. Hello, you just mentioned that we need to be the bridge and the water in our work. Very nice. If the organization or the atmosphere does not help to enhance this, how can I improve it? So maybe how can we foster this kind of spirit in our teams if we're leaders? How can we kind of create a culture where storytelling and asking why?
Okay, so a couple of considerations. First of all, if your organization is siloed and rigid to the point where there is less integration, less opportunities for collaboration, that is a sign that it is ripe for disruption, unquestionably, because in the environment that we work in, there is someone else who sees that as an opportunity and is working to eat their lunch. So take that as a warning sign, first of all. But on that, this idea that we kind of talked about around spending time and effort in developing or understanding other people's work informally helps you then find those opportunities for cross-functional work. A lot of what I've been talking about is informal and needs to be informal, and in that sense, what you need to do is, like, some of this can be after hours or during lunch times or what have you. You do have to go that extra mile. You do have to take the extra effort in those types of rigid environments. You have no choice, unfortunately. But then using those learnings, that's where you get to take it to your management team and say, guys, based on my understanding of this, we have a real opportunity here. And even better, working with those colleagues that you foster to find those opportunities, go together to your management team and say, we have collectively come up with this concept of how to make this better.
Perfect. I have a small question that I was thinking throughout this presentation. I saw anyone who's a young father like you are thinks of this question. What career path should I be suggesting for my child? Or I read an article that says 50% of the jobs that our children will be doing in 20 years haven't been invented yet, which I think is staggering. Should I just say become a doctor or a lawyer or something like that? What direction should our children be taking?
So I put a premium on education. That first and foremost, it's helped me enormously in my career, in my life. I've lived in 13 countries to date. Canada is the 13th that I live in. I've traveled enormously. I mentioned that I'm a Canadian and have been for 10 years. But prior to becoming a Canadian citizen, I was a Sudanese citizen. So it was difficult for me to travel and develop my career. And it was on the back of my education that I was able to start and then to continue. I think less in terms of individual careers. Certainly, let's say even today, a millennial audience will go through what do they say, 5 different, not jobs, but careers in their lives. So think less in terms of an individual function or a career. Think more in terms of instilling the education, instilling the curiosity, instilling the drive, instilling the appreciation for other responsibilities and cultures, and the work ethic. And being able to do all of these things with an entrepreneurial mindset will set them up for success. That's what I drive my poor 2 boys constantly, is to ask questions, is to build a work ethic, and is to study, study, study.
Well, thank you very much. And of course, we believe in the mantra study, study, study. Either have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, and we certainly encourage those type of growth mindset here at the University of Liverpool Online. Thank you very much, Nasser, company finishing on time today on the hour. Thank you very much to our audience who put in some fantastic questions, of which we did not get to get through all of them today. This recording will be made available to all of you. So first of all, thank you very much, Mr. Sahlool, for your appearance today. We hope to get you back as the trends continuously change for the future skills for work. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you, and good night to everyone. Thank you.